The speaker is Monika Suchowierska-Stephany, who received her PhD in Development and Child Psychology from the University of Kansas. During her studies in the US, Monika became interested and trained in applied behavior analysis and working with people with developmental disabilities.
Upon her return to Poland in 2003, she started to spread knowledge about ABA in the country. In 2005, she founded a Center for Early Intervention, Step by Step, a private institution in Warsaw that provides early intensive intervention to children with autism spectrum.
She has over 25 years of experience in working with children with ASD.
Today she will speak on the topic of neurodiversity.
Please welcome
Monika Suchowierska-Stephany.
I wanted to thank the organizers of the European Meeting of Family Enrichment and Personal Project Leaders. I'm very happy to be here, although I am also a bit nervous to speak to such distinguished group of people, as I am a beginner student of the Family Academy series of courses. As a matter of fact, I'm starting my second course, yay, next week. So, thank you. Anyway, the topic for today, time is going. Okay, the topic for today is working with parents of neurodivergent children. I also put a subtitle on the bottom of this slide. How different is it from working with parents of typically developing children? The agenda for today is such that I'm not going to keep you wondering about my answer to the question from the first slide. So I will start with the thesis statement. Then I will introduce the idea of neurodiversity very briefly, provide a few characteristics of autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, and finally talk about guidelines for parents. And then if there is time for question and answers, I'll be happy to entertain them as well. So when you look at this slide, the text on this slide should not be surprising to you. It's actually a direct quote from a booklet for a course entitled First Letters by Family Enrichment Program. And it says, child rearing involves one very important task for parents, the ongoing education of their own virtues. Which ones? Many of them. All of them. Perseverance, patience, optimism, and above all, a wholehearted acceptance of each child with his or her qualities, possibilities, and defects. This makes a lifelong program of love and a happier family. How do children learn from parents? Through three ways. Example, what they see, encouragement, what they practice, and instruction, what they understand. That's why we need to explain why they believe, we need to understand why we believe what we believe. Specifically, in the first letter of St. Peter, he writes, always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do it with gentleness and respect. So, when I think about what parenting involves, as it says on this slide, and how you teach virtues to your children, I propose this statement. Working with parents of neurodivergent children is not that different than working with parents of children who develop typically. We're going to talk a little bit today about neurodiversity, and neurodiversity is a fact of life, meaning that there are differences in how our brains function. What is neurodiversity? Other words to talk about it is that it is the understanding that no human brain is exactly alike. It's the understanding that people learn and process information in different ways, and this idea should be embraced. And the idea that everyone has their own unique ways of thinking, interacting, and experiencing the world around them. So when you look at the population, the biggest group of people are neurotypical. Smaller group of people are called neurodivergent. Neurotypical refers to those individuals whose brain conforms to typical developmental expectation. They represent a neuromajority of people whose development follows a similar pathway. And we live in a society that favors the neurotypical pathway, which is often seen as the ideal or normal way of developing. Neurodivergent refers to those individuals whose development diverges from typical developmental expectations. This is often a lifelong difference, such as being on the autism spectrum. We live in a society that views those differences as something that needs to be fixed or reduced. However, neurodivergence is its own way of being and should be respected, as I propose. The term neurodivergent describes people whose brain differences affect how their brain works. That means that they have different strengths and different challenges. The possible differences include developmental disorders, learning disabilities, and other conditions. Possible strengths include better memory, being able to mentally picture three-dimensional objects very easily, the ability to solve complex mathematical calculations in someone's head, and many more. So, neurodivergent, again, it's not a medical term. It's a way to describe people using words other than normal or abnormal. That is important because there is no single definition of normal for how the human brain works. So we can talk about what they call a neurodiversity umbrella. So neurodiversity is an umbrella term which is used to describe people who have brains and thinking styles which work in a slightly different way from the neurotypical people. It includes a wide variety of differences such as autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, Tourette's syndrome, and literacy and numeracy difficulties. And being neurodivergent provides our children with strengths that should be nurtured and challenges that should be effectively supported. Neurodivergent children can have a range of difficulties, for example, with balance and coordination, social and sensory difficulties, difficulties with attention and impulsivity. They may have difficulties remembering information, organizing information, planning, controlling actions, using their attention flexibly. But they also sometimes have difficulties in regulating their emotions. They often need help to recognize and monitor what they are thinking, how they are feeling, and how they are acting. Nevertheless, many people who are neurodivergent are very accomplished and very successful. More and more people who are neurodivergent are talking about their experiences. Some examples of famous and successful people who are or were, who are alive and are neurodivergent, or who are not with us anymore but were neurodivergent, include Bill Gates, Albert Einstein, Simone Biles, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Lionel Messi. Kids at schools love this example. They always are very happy to see that. Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. So just a few words about autism spectrum disorder, which is one of the developmental conditions under the umbrella of neurodivergence. It's a lifelong neurological difference that affects how people communicate and interact with others. Autism begins in utero, although children with ASD may not be diagnosed until they are preschool or even school-age children, or sometimes older as well, when signs of the disorder become more apparent. There are two areas in which ASD symptoms are evident. One is the area of communication and social skills, and the other area is restricted or repetitive behaviors. Autism or autism spectrum disorder is known as a spectrum disorder because people with autism can have a range of characteristics, needs, strengths, and challenges. So some of the challenges in the area of communication and social skills can include, for younger children, failure to respond to their own name, disinterest in giving, sharing, or showing objects of interest to adults, aversion to displays of affection, and preference for solitary play. For older children, they may include difficulty carrying on a reciprocal or back and forth conversation, lack of eye contact, difficulty using or reading body language in others, difficulty recognizing one's own or other people's emotions, responding appropriately to different social situations, and understanding social relationships. They also can show some aversion to displays of affection and preference for solitary play. Right, children with restricted or repetitive behaviors, which is the second area, can become very focused on minute details to the point of distraction. In addition, they may become upset by minor changes in daily routines. They can play or manipulate objects such as line them, sort them, organize toys or objects instead of playing with them, so rather manipulate them, show a consuming interest in a specific topic or object, and have unusual sensory sensitivities. Historically, there was a common misconception that the autistic spectrum is a straight line between low and high functioning. So that's how people used to think, that there are individuals on one end of the spectrum and those individuals are wholly low functioning, or there are individuals on the other end of spectrum and they are wholly high functioning. But as understanding has increased, it is clear that everyone on the spectrum is very different and has different strengths and weaknesses. You may hear this referred to as a spiky profile, and it's a great way to explain the differences of ability that are associated with neurodivergence conditions. For example, one autistic person may be highly creative, but struggle to organize themselves. Another may excel at math, but find it hard to join in a two-way conversation. As for cognitive functioning, we also know that about 31% of children with ASD have an intellectual disability, 25% are in the borderline range, and 44% have average to above IQ score. Now let's move to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, another condition under the neurodivergence umbrella. It's a neurodevelopmental condition that affects how a person pays attention, manages impulses, and regulates activity levels. ADHD is usually presented in three different ways, meaning by hyperactivity, by impulsivity, and by inattention. And children with ADHD may be labeled as disruptive for behavior that they frankly cannot often control. Here are some examples of symptoms of inattention. For example, a child would make careless mistakes in his schoolwork, her schoolwork, due to lack of attention to detail. They may often lose or misplace things. They may avoid activities that require a lot of concentration, and they get easily distracted. Some signs of hyperactivity include, for younger children, fidgeting with anything that they have in their hands. They may be tapping feet, they may be rocking on their chair or wiggle in their seat. They may get up often from their desk, table, during class, meal times for no apparent reason. They may talk excessively and often at a louder volume than other students. They often seem to be always on the go. Some of the signs of impulsivity include, for example, blurting out answers before the question has been asked in full, being able to consider long-term consequences of actions, so basically doing before thinking, interrupting or speaking over other people, being, for example, unaware of danger. Also, some neurodevelopmental differences are caused by underlying processes in the brain called executive functions. Executive functions are brain's self-management and control skills. So we can think about those skills as the air traffic control system that helps us plan, focus, organize, start tasks, finish them, manage emotions and behaviors. So some of the areas of difficulties, as you can see on this slide, can include emotional control, impulse control, working memory, task initiation, and organization. So switching gears here back to parents, this is again a slide from the booklet from Family Enrichment Program. What does working with parents entail? It entails working together on building good habits in children. Good parenting involves training and directing the will of a child towards its proper ends. The child learns to make the right choices and turns them into habits. Good habits do not appear spontaneously in a child. They come about largely through the energetic and consistent effort of the parents. And children acquire good habits the way adults do, by constantly repeating certain actions with the conviction that this is worth doing, that they are working towards something good. And one of the developmental and behavioral psychologists, Dr. Sidney Bijou, put forth the following quote: "Research has shown that the most effective way to reduce problem behavior in children is to strengthen desirable behavior through positive reinforcement, rather than trying to weaken undesirable behavior through aversive and negative processes." So what we want to focus on is on teaching, again, good habits to our children. Another developmental and behavioral psychologist, Dr. Glenn Latham, published a book a long time ago, but I think this book is fabulous and I still use it in my work. The title is The Power of Positive Parenting. And in the book, he talks about the use of non-coercive positive parenting skills. And he talks about the fact that those skills, positive parenting skills, enable parents to have frequent positive interactions with their children. They enable to clearly establish and communicate their expectations to children, clearly establish the consequences for following those expectations. They allow parents to learn to ignore behaviors that do not threaten the basic quality of life, limb, and property. They help parents attend to inappropriate behavior in a neutral, precise, and directive way. Not question non-compliant children about their behavior, nor ask them to explain their inappropriate behavior, especially at the time of the problematic situation. Parents use the inappropriate behavior of one child as a cue to attend to the appropriate behavior of other children. And very importantly, parents smile and laugh and talk and touch a lot. So there is another website that was put together by a student of Dr. Latham's, and that website is called 3L Parenting, and the 3 L's stand for love, laughter, and limits. And limits are on the bottom, but nevertheless they are there, as you can see. Another way to talk about positive parenting is that they call it parenting with pride. So pride is an acronym. I'll show this to you in a minute, but basically those letters refer to 5 positive parenting techniques that can be used very easily at home. Those pride parenting skills are a set of strategies that are used in such therapeutic programs as parent-child interaction therapy and other positive parenting approaches. They are designed to strengthen the parent-child relationship, encourage positive behavior, and reduce conflict by focusing on positive attention and connection between parents and children. And the letters in the acronym refer to praising appropriate behavior, paying attention, acknowledging appropriate behavior, reflecting on what the children are saying, which means that I do listen, I hear what you're saying, imitating appropriate behavior, I see what you're doing, I like it, and I will do the same, describing appropriate behavior, so it increases concentration of the parent and attention to the activity. And finally, just mutual enjoyment. Just let's spend time so that we both are having fun with one another. Glenn Latham talks in his book about 5 parenting rules. They are listed here, and I will go through each of them in a little bit more detail on the following slides. So rule number 1, clearly communicate your expectations. We want children to know well what we would like them to do. So clear description of those behaviors that will get my attention, my positive attention. And then once a parent is absolutely certain that the child has a clear understanding of what is expected, then it is time to discuss the consequences for following those expectations or not. And agreeing with parental expectations is less important, meaning agreeing that yes, this would be an important thing for me to learn, than understanding them. Understanding is very, very important. Parents are taught to phrase their expectations in a positive way, where a parent would point out the child's attention to what they want them to do, as opposed to what not to do. I'll come back to the topic again, but these are called positive opposites. So here you have several examples of those positive opposites. So for example, for a child who may be getting upset easily, arguing and shouting at another person when upset, a parent would say that I want you to express your anger calmly. as opposed to saying don't shout and don't get angry. And then, like I said, I will come back to this again. Rule number 2 talks about ignoring inconsequential behavior. Inconsequential behavior means behavior that is really, it doesn't have many consequences. It doesn't have dangerous consequences. And most of the annoying behaviors of children deserve no attention whatsoever. So the question parents are taught is, which behaviors should be attended to and which ones I just shouldn't attend to. I should not pay attention to them. Many of those behaviors, Glenn Latham and others call them also junk behaviors, right? Not just junk. These behaviors can usually be ignored, and parents are taught how to ignore those behaviors in a planned way, meaning just don't say anything. Sometimes you may not even look at the child behaving this way. Rule number 3 goes very closely with rule number 2, which rule number 3 says selectively reinforce appropriate behaviors. Behavior that receives parental positive attention is behavior that is strengthened. So sometimes it is not possible to provide an immediate praise statement or a reward, but the child may be reminded of the circumstances later on and the detail of the behavior, and the parent then follows with a usually verbal reinforcer, which means praise. And sometimes parents will say that it's hard for them to notice when children are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it makes me chuckle a little bit inside when I hear that, because virtually all children in the course of the day will say or do something many times that is worth noticing. It may be a skill on the side of the parent to do notice those actions. There are several important principles to follow when using behavior-specific praise. Parents are taught to specify the behavior that you're praising. Tell the child what you like about what they are doing. Use praise immediately after the behavior. Initially praise small improvements in behavior. Don't expect a huge change right away. And reward those improvements every time they occur. So work with approximations, right? Don't expect big changes right away. Work with effort, basically. Provide attention, praise only for behaviors you want to increase in frequency, and focus on the positive. Teach children what to do instead of telling them what not to do. So the praise should be specific, should be meaningful, and some of the examples could be, I love how you use your words to tell me you need personal space, or great job taking a deep breath when you felt overwhelmed, or you stayed focused on your projects for such a long time. That's incredible. Or thank you for asking before touching that. That was really thoughtful. That would be behavior-specific praise. And this is just a list of, in one of the handouts for parents, of good behaviors to notice. Being kind, being a good sport, compromising, helping, making eye contact, sharing, showing empathy, taking turns. For example, being safe, staying calm, calmly expressing feelings, waiting patiently, maybe focusing attention, maybe creative thinking as far as school and learning skills, maybe being persistent, right? Persevering even on difficult tasks, working hard, working independently, accepting no for an answer, asking permission, for example, following directions, or doing things right away. And this is, again, a list of the positive opposites. Another way to talk about them is catch them being good. right? So catch these. So instead of saying, don't be aggressive or don't hit your brother, you can say, I appreciate you being careful and gentle with your little sister, right? Or instead of saying, you again didn't listen to me, or you again didn't listen to me right away, you can say, I really appreciate how you followed, how you did what I asked you to do right away. So positive opposites. Rule number 4, sometimes there will be behaviors that cannot be ignored. So if those behaviors happen, stop them and redirect inappropriate behavior. Gently, gently. So for example, there can be a situation when children are fighting, right? And there is a possibility of them hurting one another. You cannot ignore that. And you can say, I'm sorry you're upset. Go to your room for a few minutes and relax. Lay down on your bed, take several deep breaths and tell yourself to relax. When you're feeling better and have control over yourself, if you want to talk about it, let's get back together. So gently stop, redirect, and then maybe come back to the situation. There is also a corrective teaching procedure that is often recommended to parents. The elements of this corrective teaching procedure are listed here. So maybe instead of reading them, I will be reading a scenario and you can follow sort of the steps. So let's say the scenario is that Jim fails to follow his teacher's direction. And the teacher says, Jim, I like having you in class. You always give good answers to my questions. Just now, however, when I ask you to sit down and listen to the lesson, you continue to talk to Bill. When I ask you to do something, you need to look at me, say okay or not, and do it immediately. We're on number 3. Okay. When you follow my directions, our class is a better place to learn for you and for everyone else in it. Jim, what are the 3 things you should do when I give you an instruction? And let's assume Jim is a bright boy, and he says, look at you, say okay, and do it. And that's great, and then you can say, let's practice. If Jim doesn't respond, prompt him, right? Remind him what he needs to do, and repeat the question again. So when we practice, the parent can say, or the teacher will say, I'll ask you to fold your arms and look at me, and you show me the correct way to follow my instruction. And then you practice with Jim, and you praise his correct responses. And then prompt him if, for example, something was missing or a step was omitted. And rule number 5 is stay close to your children. Basically what this means is increase the level and improve the quality of verbal but also non-verbal interactions with your children. Arrange for alone time with your child. Playtime is easily forgotten in the hustle and bustle of the everyday life. Whereas distraction-free playtime offers a chance to pause, to breathe, and connect with your child. So parenting experts say that as little as 5 minutes, maybe 10, every day of playtime can strengthen the parent-child bond. And physical interactions are very important, so hugging is recommended, right? And then finally, parents are taught about different approaches to parenting, and the one that has been shown numerous times in research to produce best short and long-term outcomes is authoritative parenting, authoritative approach. One can call it positive discipline. And in this approach, parents parents are taught 5 core skills: giving attention to the child himself or herself, lots of attention, giving signals of encouragement of appropriate behaviors, using active ignoring, issuing clear instruction, and sometimes, if needed, implementing timeouts. So the purpose of this positive discipline is to help the child internalize a healthy sense of right and wrong. James Stenson writes, "The word discipline doesn't mean to punish. It is related to the word disciple, and it really means to follow. Many grow up simply following their impulses when they should be following something more powerful, a well-formed conscience." Also, in some of the positive parenting brochures, programs, they talk about 3 B's of effective parenting. And the 3 B's are be positive, be proactive, be consistent. So we talked about being positive, focusing on what the child should be doing and helping the child to learn how to engage in those behaviors. Being proactive, here they talk about, again, establishing expectations, explaining why you want the child to do what you ask them to do, pre-teaching, if needed, some of those skills, and prompting if needed. Some elements of those parent training programs focus on how to give instruction, right? How to give effective instructions. And they recommend moving close to your child, get your child's attention, making eye contact, and using his or her name before giving an instruction. This may be especially important for children who have difficult time focusing attention. Use a firm but not loud, gruff voice. Give an instruction that is specific and simple. Use physical gestures when appropriate, such as pointing, for example, to where you want the toys to be put. Use do instructions rather than don't instructions. Wait quietly for 5 seconds after giving the instruction. The 5 seconds, in many materials you see the 5-second rule, but there is nothing magical about the rule. The point is it can be 7 seconds or it's 8 seconds as well. The point is give a little bit of time, but not too long on the other hand, not 20 seconds or 25 seconds for the child to respond. Don't expect sort of a military compliance within half a second, you know, or even before you actually finish giving the instruction. So anyway, give the child time to respond. And of course, appreciate when they do what you ask them to do. Here is a table that shows ineffective instructions. Because I just said that the way you phrase the instruction makes a difference. So ineffective instructions, questionable instructions, meaning if you provide an instruction in this way, it may be less likely that the child will follow it, is chain instructions. You just say too many things, right, at once. Just long instructions, instructions that include numerous steps. Vague instructions, behave yourself, right? Or stop monkeying. Question instructions, so instruction in the form of a question. Of course, I am not saying that you shouldn't be asking questions to your child, such as, would you like to do homework now? It's a legitimate question if you mean to ask a question. And if you do mean to ask a question, then that means you're okay with a, no, not right now, maybe a little bit later answer. And that's good, that's okay, that's fine. But if you are trying to somehow, what's the word? Smuggle, right? Smuggle an instruction in the form of a question like, how about if you clean now? Really what you mean is, please clean your room, then that's not the right way to present this instruction. Let's instruction, let's clean the room. And the child may say, great, let's. Go ahead, right? So again, maybe it says right here that the child feels strict, and it may be the case, right? Because let's assumes that we're going to do it together, and if you want the child to do it, then please say it. And then sometimes, not always, but sometimes instruction followed by a reason. Meaning that if you provide an instruction that finishes with a reason for why you're asking the child, for some children, again, this may be a reason to argue with that reason, right? Or a situation, a stimulus to argue with this reason. So sometimes, again, for some children, it is better to first provide the instruction, then when the child actually starts following it, then you can say, I'm very glad you started getting dressed as I asked you to, because we don't have much time, we may be late. And then finally, this last couple of slides have to do with being proactive, but especially with children that may have a difficult time just following instructions that are given verbally. Some individuals on the autism spectrum, also children with ADHD, respond much better to visually presented information. So they talk about the fact that the parent can be proactive meaning do something ahead of the problems to increase the likelihood that desired behavior will happen by, for example, rearranging the environment, for example, seating environment, using schedules, using visual supports, providing choice. So these are just a few examples that I found and I wanted to show you. So visual schedules, just for a child to know, here is, for example, a class schedule, but it also can be a visual schedule of what's going to happen during a given part of the day that may be a little challenging for the child, such as morning routine or evening routine. The other example in a bluish background is unpacking routine. So visually presenting to a child, for example, on the spectrum, what actually needs to be done, the 4 steps that need to be done to get ready for class when you come into the classroom. I unpack my backpack, I put things on my desk, I put other things on, I put lunch on the shelf, and I hang the backpack in the cubby. Or the last example is of washing hands. Again, individuals on the spectrum, children on the spectrum, have a difficult time learning longer behaviors, more complex behaviors, such as, for example, washing their hands. So it may be helpful for them if we present together with the instruction or our expectation that they are learning how to wash their hands independently, sort of a visual schedule, what needs to be done to wash their hands. Sometimes first, then, as they call them, or now, next, then, or now, next, little schedules are helping children with transitions. Right? And again, this is an area where some individuals on the spectrum and some individuals with ADHD may also have a difficult time transitioning from activity to activity. So a visual schedule can help them. By the same token, this visual change alert, right? Again, some individuals who are neurodivergent don't like unexpected changes. They don't do very well with unexpected changes. So you can have a visual that will actually alert them, help them deal with the change. Or, for example, choice boards. And finally, this is an example of contracts that you can help a child remembering, you can say, what the agreement is between you and the child by actually arranging it as a visual contract, right, in which it is specifically stated, you know, what is the task to be done and when I expect you to do it, when and how I expect you to do it, and what will be some of the consequences, meaning well, rewards, right, consequences for how we agree for when you follow this contract. And the contract can be done in a more sort of complex way in written form, but it also can be done in a simpler way as on the right hand side here. So to conclude, Glenn Latham talked about positive, effective parenting, and he talked about the fact that the most effective way to parent a child is to maintain a close relationship and teach and promote good behavior, good habits, good virtues. Glenn Latham said specifically, children need sunlight, they need happiness, they need love and nurture. They need kindness and refreshment and affection. Every home, regardless of the cost of the house, can provide an environment of love, which be an environment of salvation. So the quote is saying that love and emotional warmth matter more than money, and that any home, no matter how humble, can be a place where children thrive and grow into healthy, whole, spiritually grounded people. So as you can see on this slide, it does not say this recommendation is for a parent of a typically developing child or a neurodivergent child. This recommendation is universal. It's for parents of all children. So I believe it supports my thesis that I stated, and thank you very much for your attention. Thanks.